Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back. If you don't know me, my name is Catherine, and on this channel we do autopsies, we do reviews, we do different types of cultural postmortem. So I'm so grateful that you could make it here or make it back from, wherever it is on the internet that you happen to drop in from. If you do know me, please get comfortable. Please take your usual seats, grab a coffee, grab a cushion, whatever it is you do when you watch my videos. But yeah, without further ado, let's begin.
My name's William Golding, and I wrote this book, Lord of the Flies, in I think it was either 1953 or 1954. There have been a great many things said about how it came to be written, and I don't know whether any of them are true or not. As far as I'm concerned, it happened because one day I was sitting one side of the fireplace and my wife was sitting the other, and I suddenly said to her, wouldn't it be a good idea to write a story about some boys on an island showing how they would really behave, being boys and not little saints as they usually are in children's books. And she said, that's a first-class idea, you write it. So I went ahead and wrote it. When girls say to me, and very reasonably, why isn't it a bunch of girls, and why did you write this about a bunch of boys? Well, my reply is, I was once a little boy, I have been a brother, I have been a father, I am going to be a grandfather. I have never been a sister or a mother or a grandmother. So this is why I wrote it really about little boys. That's one answer. Another answer is, of course, to say that if you, as it were, scale down human beings, scale down society, if you land with a group of little boys, they are more like scaled down society than a group of little girls would be. Don't ask me why, and this is a terrible thing to say because I'm going to be chased from hell to breakfast by all the women who talk about equality. This is nothing to do with equality at all. I mean, I think women are foolish to pretend they're equal to men. They're far superior and always have been. But one thing you cannot do with them is take a bunch of them and boil them down, so to speak, into a set of little girls who would then become a kind of image of civilization, of society. That's another reason why they were little boys. The other thing is, why aren't they little boys and little girls? Well, if they'd been little boys and little girls, we being who we are, sex would have raised its lovely head. And I didn't want this book to be about sex. I mean, sex is too trivial a thing to get in with a story like this, which was about the problem of evil and the problem of how people are to live together in society, not just as lovers or man and wife.
So, notwithstanding your familiarity with, or otherwise, the story of Lord of the Flies, first and foremost, I think it's urgent for you to know that the author themselves has not told the original story that they sought out to tell. The novel we inherit today is not precisely the novel that was first conceived, and so Lord of the Flies is a bit of a disturbed specimen, and it was not subjected willingly to these editorial changes. To the extent, in fact, that William Golding, the author of this story, confessed that he could, quote, no longer bear to look at the story. I genuinely just feel that it is important that that I conscientize you to this. It is important to ask why certain stories drift into the literary canon in the precise shape, in the precise way that they do, because it's not incidental. Because when a narrative becomes canonized, effectively ritualized in classrooms, sanctified across generations, I think it's urgent. I think honestly it's responsible to ask what survives the edit and what doesn't. What severities in the original story were sharpened, what constellations are blunted, what original commitments were subtly removed so that the parable may travel more easily, I guess, across the secular terrain. One might even ask with some unease, as I definitely am, why it is that certain malevolent presences, some certain hypothetical forces that have conspiratorial persuasion over us all survive textual refinement, whilst more overt invocations of divinity, or more explicitly of God, recede. Hold that thought, because I actually want to begin with an element that grounds us. I actually want to begin with an element that ties us to the story and the story to us, especially given what is happening in the world right now, and that is anticipatory paranoia. I am talking about something that I know I know good and well. I am not distinct in experiencing, because I have had the pleasure of ranting and talking about this particular yeah, this particular grievance with some of you. But yes, I'm talking about the constant pinch that something is uniquely imminent, right? Something is on the horizon and you must reorganize your life around its rumored arrival. You weren't worried, you weren't anxious yesterday, but today you are informed that you should be. It's not even like what? It's not even 11 a.m. You haven't even pooped. But the criticality of your behindedness is being shoved down your throat before you can even conceptualize like what day it is. You know what I'm saying? It's this feeling that there's something going on, there's something you should be preparing for, or you haven't done enough the previous day in order to forfend against what could happen to. It's a lot. We know the cycle. It's actually a liminal dynamic better described as proleptic dread. The anticipatory structuring of consciousness around a threat, not yet fully manifest, right? Not yet literal, not yet obvious, but already metabolized, already sitting inside your nervous system.
The US dropped Tomahawk missiles on Iran. I just woke up. In retaliation, Iran will block off 20% of the world's oil, so expect oil prices to go way up.
Can I get breakfast or at least a cup of water first before you ruin my day with this horrible news?
35,000 troops have been deployed or will be deployed, and the US president has said to expect casualties and the death of American heroes.
I thought the airstrikes in June on their nuclear sites wiped out that capacity, but you're saying that they still have it?
Well, they're trying to rebuild that nuclear capacity, so that gives them a one free voucher, all-inclusive freedom package.
I thought he was a no wars president. What happened to that?
Well, make no mistake about it, this was not a limited airstrike. The US is at war with Iran. And oh, did I forget that we're trying to send a freedom package to Cuba?
I haven't even pooed yet.
Well, it's actually pretty cool. The US is trying to start an insurrection so that the Iranian people will overthrow their own government, where the people are so oppressed. I mean, women can't go to school, acid is thrown on their...
Okay, I'm gonna just go back to bed.
Your subconscious is greeted with this paralyzing urgency before the day even begins. And you didn't even get to see the horizon lighten, because the dawn already came with this exhausting familiar shadow. I am talking about exactly what you think I'm talking about, and I'm not going to qualify the anxiety yet because as I tell this story, I don't want to render the narrative dead on arrival. I kind of need to keep you all with me, reined in for this particular video, because I know, like, looking at my notes, I know it might be a bit of a long one, but please, I ask humbly that you would extend me your patience, that you would extend me your attention, because I need you guys, like, really, I need you guys to stay with me, to stick with me as I tell you this story. It might be a long one, but it is it is so good. It is so good. So yes, stay locked in, stay tight while I tell you what it is that goes down. I am not going to start chronologically. I'm actually going to start somewhere in the middle of the story. We begin with a parachutist, and his dead body lies in the trees of an island. The wind is tugging at his limbs in a way that seems grotesquely animate. It's really disturbing, and you, amongst a commune of schoolboys, are on such an island. The island itself is still trembling from the throes of war. Or, who knows? Who knows? It might not be war. It could be bad weather. We don't know at this point. The detail, though, it hardly matters. The point is, dread fills the vacuum. You guys are just kids. You've all been dropped here. You have no institutional scaffolding. You have no one but yourselves. You have no inherited hierarchy except, of course, the one you improvise. And within your shallow, prepubescent panic, two gravitational centers emerge almost immediately.
There is Simon, who will go up the mountain even though he's killed for it. There is Ralph, who will go on trying to keep society together. There are people who will be loyal as long as they can.
We've got Ralph. He is elected. He is luminous, he is procedural. He finds a conch shell in the sand where you guys have just landed, right on the beach, and he blows it. The sound gathers you and the boys into something of a parliament. He believes in rescue. He believes that someone will eventually come and find you. He believes rationally in maintaining a signal fire, not as spectacle, but as promise that somebody elsewhere in the, on the sea, where on the ocean will see the fire, see the smoke, and know that somebody needs help, somebody needs rescue. Jack Merridew, however, oh no, he is different. He's a different breed, he's a different kind, and even before the island, even before this crisis, Jack and Ralph were two dialectical poles. It's this warring of charisma versus ferocity, right? We've got a legitimate person, one who believes in order, versus somebody who is more inclined to the intense. Anyone who has experienced high school or adolescence in any capacity will recognize this dynamic immediately. I personally believe that middle school is not so much a popularity contest as much as it is a negotiation of identity. Because at this age, our identities are so malleable, so volatile, so porous. Prepubescence is a liminal corridor before individuality, eventually and necessarily hardens into adult persona. Social allegiance at this stage in one's life feels existential because in many ways it is. It is a delicate space. You are at the threshold. Anyway, Jack believes in the hunt. He believes in the intoxication of pursuit. And he intuits early that fear is much more galvanizing than reason. Their rivalry, Jack and Ralph's, that is not an immediate war, right? It's not an immediate, these boys going at each other. It is more like a slow tectonic shift. Ralph privileges rescue, the signal fire, the slow anticipation of return, but on the horizon. It is long term. Jack privileges the hunt, immediacy, blood, visceral affirmation. This is the first pressure point because civilization requires delayed gratification. Power thrives on immediate sensation. The tension in this sense is not merely political, it is actually in a lot of ways temporal, because one leader organizes around tomorrow, the other monopolizes today, the immediate moment, the immediate feeling of relief. And then we have Piggy. Oh, poor Piggy. Oh, okay. I don't want to spoil it, but yes, we have a boy named Piggy. He is asthmatic, he is brilliant, but he is socially despised. He actually provides the glasses that provide the fuel for the first signal fire. Reason literally supplies flame. Vision, in an explicit sense, is borrowed. The Enlightenment metaphor is simple and yet absolutely devastating because rational clarity provides the generation sustaining heat, but it is fragile, it is contingent, it is dependent on those who are often least celebrated. Consider the island itself. It is abundant, you guys. Fruit hangs heavy, water flows, shelter is very much achievable, and so obviously hunger does not govern them, and scarcity, the foundational concept of economics, is not yet operative. If economics is, as Lionel Robbins defined it, the study of human behavior under scarce means with alternative uses, then reasonably we can conclude that the island seems pre-economic, which is precisely the point. These kids are hardly constrained by material deprivation. See, they are constrained by their own imaginations. And in this world, in the world that we currently live in, scarcity is often architected rather than discovered. Access is gated, right? Distribution is engineered. The island, by contrast, begins as surplus, as arguably how our world did. We began being on this planet with there being more than enough. And on this island, there is definitely enough. And yet, ironically, disorder still blooms. The first tremor begins not as hunger, but as rumor. The beast that eventually begins to slowly take hold of their consciousnesses begins not as a literal creature, as a literal beast, but as a rumor, a littlen's dreamlike recollection of a snake thing. And so obviously the older boys hear it and they laugh, they dismiss it, they're like, no, you're speaking nonsense. But the suggestion still metastasizes. Fear, once articulated, acquires ontological weight, and we see this happen in real time, in real psychology. And that simply means that fear, once named, once resident within your subconscious, can begin to restructure reality once you allow the theory to shape the way you behave, the way you action yourself out in the world. The beast has no body. Nobody has seen this alleged malevolence on the island. It has not physically acquired any of the boys, but it does eventually acquire all of them through their belief in it. The principle is that the imagined threat reorganizes governance much more effectively, much more severely than any overt deprivation. And so that leads me to posit that William Golding's thesis is much more Augustinian than it is Rousseauian. And if you're not familiar with these philosophies, basically the bare bones of it is that Augustine and Rousseau offer opposing views on human nature and society. Augustine contended that evil is not imported from defective institutions, from external malevolences, but that is latent. It is. Yeah, it's like an incurable disorder within the human will. It's effectively the self curved upon the self. Remove constraint and one does not discover innocence within a child, within a human being, but rather like I said, a disordered appetite just waiting permission. Rousseau, by contrast, imagined the child as naturally good, only corrupted by societal distortion. Once you remove the oppressive structure, goodness naturally emerges. Golding stages the debate in this story, and he effectively hands the verdict to 12-year-olds. Remove adult reinforcement, introduce fear, and observe.
One time, he took his class on a field trip to a prehistoric fort called Figsbury Ring. He split his kids into two groups, one to attack and one to defend. And then he just let them go at it. It was like King of the Mountain with no rules. Golding later called it experimental science. He wanted to see just how far they would go. And he was amazed at what he saw. Nothing as extreme as Lord of the Flies, but perhaps that's because Golding the adult could step in and say, "Hey, don't kill your classmates, thanks." And that's where Lord of the Flies came from.
Now, progressing along with the story, 3 goals are declared. Have fun, survive, and keep the fire burning, like at all costs. Only one, though, will prove to be difficult. In specific, the signal fire that they were all, resting their hope of rescue on goes out during a pig hunt. In the midst of all of this, a ship passes through the night completely unnoticed. When the twins, Sam and Eric, mistake the dead parachutist I told you about earlier, remember in the beginning of the story, when they mistake this hanging corpse for the beast itself, the fear becomes doctrine. And Jack weaponizes the beast. He will hunt it. He will protect you. And so allegiance shifts accordingly. He then goes on to form a rival group against Ralph. They paint their faces. They allow that anonymity to absolve them of the weight of responsibility. And I think that brightens one's audacity. We see it online. We see that, it's so much easier to commit the inexcusable when nobody knows who you are. The hunt intensifies. A pig is slaughtered. Its head is severed and mounted on a stick, an offering effectively to the beast. What was once a rumor has now become deity. Flies gather in sick, obscene congregation around the bulbous, bloody flesh. The head has now become oracle. Lord of the Flies is a literal translation of Beelzebub, otherwise known, referenced in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 1. It's articulated as a Philistine deity, and in later Jewish and Christian theology, Beelzebub becomes associated with demonic sovereignty. It's corruption that feeds on decay. Directly said, survival of the fittest. We know, guys, that flies do not inherently create rot. They're not generators of disgust. They gather where rot already exists. They gather where decay is already latent. And here is the chilling clarity. The beast is not external imposition. It is internal permission. Simon, the novel's quiet mystic, actually confronts the head in this fevered hallucination that actually speaks to him. I actually think it's appropriate to read out to you the direct quote. Fancy thinking the beast was something you could hunt and kill. I am part of you. See, guys, this is the theological nucleus. The enemy is not out there. It's not outside of your chambers. It is the human will. It is your interior locus of volition unmoored. The beast is not something you can hunt and kill. It is inside of you. And so the climax of the story unfolds in ritualized frenzy. Simon discovers that the feared monster is actually the dead corpse sitting in the trees. And so naturally he runs to deliver this news, right? The news that should reasonably deliver them all from their fear. And so he returns to base only to find the boys, his schoolmates, dancing. It's strange. They seem taken over by something not right. Something has definitely taken over their souls, their minds, their means of being able to control themselves. His schoolmates are painted, they are chanting, they are absolutely in rapture, and it's so bad that when Simon arrives, they mistake him for the beast and they murder him. It's truly the sorest depiction, I think, of collective absolution through collective violence. The ritual consumes the prophet. Again, to reiterate, to emphasize, you guys, these are children, and now they have blood on their hands. After that, the decline becomes aggressive acceleration. Jack's tribe goes and they steal Piggy's glasses. This is literally the last instrument of reason. Ralph confronts them, and Roger, who is another character who has been, practicing cruelty in increments, he releases a boulder, and just like that, we have our second death. Piggy's dead. Ralph now becomes prey. The entire island is set ablaze by Jack's camp to flush out Ralph, to get their, now not even their friend, not even their classmate anymore, but their victim. The signal fire, the element that was supposed to be a secure guarantee of rescue from the beginning of the story, has been grotesquely inverted from a beacon of rescue to a weapon of extermination. Civilization's instrument has now become persecution's tool. Ralph, obviously realizing what is happening, that his life is literally on the line, he runs through burning paradise and miraculously collapses at the boots of, shockingly, an adult. This is a British naval officer, so okay, salvation, finally, maybe, apparently. Well, not quite. Because see, the rest of the boys sob for the end of their innocence, for their brokenness, they are disgusted with themselves, for the monsters that they have become. And I wish I could say that was the end of the story, but it isn't. And the reason I say that is because this officer turns back, okay, faintly embarrassed, not to his boat, not to his canoe, but to his warship. A larger, more systemized expression of the same violence. What is slowly, chillingly becoming obvious is that the adult world is merely the island, but at scale. It is organized violence rather than improvised violence. The island that you boys found yourselves on was not an anomaly. It was not anything unique. It was not anything new under the sun. It was actually a miniature of the world that you had been living in all along. So now you know the story. Now I have conscientized you to the plot. Now it's time to talk. I want to briefly address why the editorial subtraction matters. Under the guidance of editor Charles Monteith, an entire opening sequence about nuclear evacuation was removed. Simon's more overt encounter with a godlike presence was pared down, and the urgency of his prayers, his instinct in appealing to the divine for protection, was also removed. The result, a parable effectively less anchored in the idea in the imminence of war or God, and more universally abstracted. Our parables, you guys, are curated, and I theorize that they are organized around the scarcity or the fear that the powers that be deem appropriate. Fear is the most organizing principle of human collectives. A beast in the trees, a mushroom cloud on the horizon, a virus particle, an algorithm poised to replace you. See, the referent mutates, but the structure remains the same. The beast need not exist in its literal form externally in order to have power in reorganizing society internally. All it needs to do is promise protection. All it needs to do is amplify dread. All it needs to do is fracture community. All it needs to do is offer belonging in exchange for vigilance. And, ironically, watch us.
They are not here for illegals, guys. They are using illegals as an excuse to make a surveillance state aimed at you. Actually, the surveillance state is already here. All those pictures that they are taking of people, that's not random. It's literally all in the Palantir database. The reason why they keep approaching people and saying, haven't you learned from what just happened? They don't care who you are. They literally don't care. They don't care who you voted for, because voting is an illusion. They want more control and power. They want control over what you think, what you say. Oh my God, you're such a crazy conspiracy theorist while you vote for JD Vance in 2028, who was funded by Peter Thiel. Not gonna be surprised if something happens to Donald Trump and they just place JD Vance in. I mean, some of you who call yourselves patriots are straight up licking the boot, thinking that the government cares about you. They never did. They just create the problems to then hand you the solution to then look like they're doing something. And people are just so gullible to then clap like seals when they see what happens to citizens. And that's what they get based on their political affiliation. You guys are useful tools. That's what you are. They'll cheer and clap until the boot comes crushing down on them.
What's interesting to me about this story is that the boys never kill the beast. And I'm not convinced that they seriously attempt to. They enthrone it, they feed it, they mount its head and baptize it in flies. And if we're honest, so do we. Personally, you guys, I'm exhausted. I'm really, really exhausted. And that is honestly the premise of why I wanted to make this video in the first place. I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted of fear being deployed Yes, I'm exhausted of fear being deployed as generational leverage. AI panic, pandemic panic, economic panic, civilizational panic in high definition, geopolitical panic, academic panic, reproductive panic. Guys, it is everywhere. The recursive insistence, the aggressive, like I said, fear mongering that your worth must be proved against looming obsolescence. You've got to optimize or decay. You've got to adapt or face the consequences of being devoured. And to me, it is really difficult not to notice how this rhetoric does not resemble a form of vulgarized Darwinism. And I use that adjective very specifically because Charles Darwin described natural selection as a biological description, differential reproductive success across diverse regimes. Charles Darwin posited this theory, natural selection, as descriptive biology, right? Variation, inheritance, time. He did not, to emphasize, he did not impose a metaphysical ethic. He did not stand upon a rock and claim, like, thou shalt compete unto the death. The phrase in and of itself, survival of the fittest, actually doesn't belong to Charles Darwin at all. It belongs to this guy named Herbert Spencer, who, with Victorian confidence and quite honestly, shamelessness, transposed evolutionary description into social prescription. You are not tired because the system is unstable. The system is unstable because you are insufficiently adaptive. How convenient. And here, I think the slide begins. Anything naturally calibrated against humanity's thriving, and let us speak fully abstractly, is gleeful for such slippage. Because once a culture, I think, accepts elimination as natural, it no longer needs overt tyrants. It can regulate itself. The logic of adaptation, abstracted from its biological boundaries, mutates into a sick form of social Darwinism, then into eugenic philosophy and other sickly diverse rhetorics of disposability, because the survival becomes the supreme good, becomes the supreme virtue. Those that are maladaptive or disruptive to the system become expendable. And history bears witnesses. Sterilization campaigns, racial hygiene initiatives, events that expose certain people's genocidal calculus. Even contemporary ecological discourse frequently drifts toward that anxiety. The planet is at overcapacity. Humanity is a surplus biomass. And I'm not even arguing for or against that. The irony is that every solution proposed to fix this crisis inevitably results in the vulnerable being exploited, humanity being leveraged against itself on every possible plane, on every possible monetarily exploitable dimension. Something is going to break, something is going to cripple the system, and not everybody is going to survive it. And those who do are too disillusioned to bear with it. Nobody is surprised anymore with the degree of evil that we see. Now obviously bad news sells, but it's getting to a point where I feel like people are so unsurprised and so disillusioned that we've become a little bit numb. And so I want you to consider the title itself, Lord of the Flies. It renders from the Hebrew Beelzebub, likely evolving from Beelzebul, Lord of, sometimes translated as Lord of the High Place or Lord Prince. Point is, it was later polemically reduced to Lord of the Flies. He is consulted in historiographical context as an oracular deity. By the New Testament, Beelzebub is overtly associated with demonic authority, right? Prince of devils. Across centuries, the name accrues these very specific associations. We're looking at pride, corruption, warfare, the parasitic enthronement of decay. As we said earlier, flies do not generate rot, right? They congregate upon what is already in a state of decomposition. Decay precedes them. Now consider what modern performance culture does. By Darwinian eugenic metrics, or their vulgarized descendants, anything that fails to optimize is categorized as decline. Anything static is labeled as inefficiency. Anything as inefficient is marked as decay. Decay then is not discovered, it is defined. We know by economic philosophy that scarcity is not merely endured, it is engineered, it is man-made. So why can that not be extended to decay. The system calibrates thresholds of adequacy. I'm talking adaptability, I'm talking efficiency, I'm talking innovation velocity, and whatever falls below that threshold is classified automatically as obsolete biomass, not necessarily eliminated in overt brutality, although we must not forget that, history reminds us that that is very much possible, but rather absorbed. And here's the more chilling parallel. What is deemed as decay is never allowed to just sit and dissolve. It must become a case study. Its degradation must be metabolized into the consciousness to remind everyone that, y'all, guys, like, this is the way the world works. Its failure must be studied, quantified, and extracted for data. Its image must serve as a cautionary tale. And so what we see, what ends up happening, or at least what I see happening is that victims become metrics. Bankruptcy becomes a necessary market correction. It's rationalized. We do not truly remember those or what systems succumb, not because they didn't have value, not because they weren't talented, not because they weren't reasonably sufficient in their own right, but because I think remembering them in accuracy would destabilize the myth of meritocratic fitness. Their stories threaten the central anxiety that governs us all, that perhaps decay is not moral or psychological failure, but systemic architecture. And so they end up becoming absorbed, but we know that flies do not passively hover over a dead, over a dead body, over a failed example. They feed. Beelzebub in this reading then is not just decay. He is the sovereignty that organizes himself around decay, that effectively reclassifies the vulnerable as necessary sacrifice to efficiency. If survival is deemed as the highest possible good, as the highest possible virtue, then those who fail to optimize, those who fail to meet, again, defined standards become like a form of liturgical offering. And we call this realism. We call this the hard truth of life. But to some extent, yes, I can agree, but to another extent, I can't help but feel like if certain people have defined the hard truth of life, like why do we have to exist within their paradigm when it's not the only paradigm that exists, and it was not the original paradigm? It was not the original standard. Anyway, that brings me to the novel's ending, which also demands scrutiny. It's very apocalyptic, and it does mirror our current economic and just situational conditions, the mess that we are in now. Because, as proposed, if the beast is interior, if violence is latent rather than externally imported, then the true crisis surely is... Yeah, sorry guys, I'm thinking in real time. The true crisis truly is not political or economic. It's actually anthropological. It's actually about what it means to be human. And if we have quietly installed survival, making it on whatever superficial standard as the highest good, as the highest virtue, as the highest evidence of your preservability as a human being, then perhaps the question is not why anxiety proliferates, but why exactly it is that we're surprised that it does. And now we turn. So what I've also noticed is that almost every belief system carries within it an eschatological grammar, right? A prediction of how this pandemonium, how honestly any defined pandemonium, whether it be family, whether it be in the world, whether it be just crises, how these crises eventually resolve. Every religion, every belief system has a template, has a story, has something that its followers can look to and expect, if that makes sense. And almost always, the imagined resolution arrives at the apex of the very type of anxiety that I described earlier: imminent war, exposure of inexcusable corruption, or just plain sickness in trusted institutions, the unraveling of civilizational illusions. The atmosphere we all end up absorbing is this disbelief edged with this inevitability. The present feels untenable, and so something must break. Every era, every generation narrates its instability as terminal, as uniquely terminal, as uniquely prescriptive of the end of the world. I don't think our generation is an exception in this. Conspiratorial conditions proliferate, right? Institutional trust thins. Technological acceleration, I'm talking your AI, automation, surveillance operations, they destabilize labor, identity, and personal worth. The horizon trembles, and into that trembling, an old eschatological reflex emerges. Surely, interruption is coming. Certain strands of evangelical Christianity, and in particular, what's it called? It's called, yes, dispensational premillennialism. Read history through such a framework. Drawing heavily on the first epistle to the Thessalonians, I think it's in chapter 4, verse 16 to 17, you'll have to check. But yes, they anticipate a decisive descent. Christ interrupts global pandemonium. The faithful are caught up, and history is punctured by this aggressive incursion by the aggressive incursion of the divine. It is sudden, it is evacuative, and it is the rescue. The resemblance to the naval officer's arrival in Lord of the Flies is honestly, it's almost too neat. It's almost too appropriate, because we have so many things converging all at once. Chaos crescendos, authority descends, salvation interrupts, but as we know, Christian theology is not monolithic. Dispensational premillennialism obviously anticipates that abrupt, quick evacuation prior to chaotic tribulation. And then we have the amillennial and post-millennial traditions, which interpret apocalyptic imagery symbolically or ecclesiologically. Okay, basically the kingdom unfolding within history as a part of history, rather than aggressively interrupting it from above. And then the last one I think is, yes, even Orthodox Christianity. It describes the idea of theosis, transfiguration through participation in divine life, not removal from chaos, but interior reconstitution within it. But we know, guys, that Christianity is not alone in anticipating these forms or similar forms of deliverance. Islamic eschatology speaks of Mahdism, the anticipation of the Mahdi who will restore justice before Judgment Day. Jewish Messianism anticipates a messianic age in which their version of a Messiah comes and restores covenantal order. Buddhism, we know they anticipate the Maitreya. This is the Dharma. This is the Buddha that comes in to renew the Dharma. Hindu traditions await Kalki, the final avatar who concludes the Kali Yuga and restores cosmic order. What else? Zoroastrianism, they anticipate this figure called the Saoshyant who comes in, and he's interpreted as a restorer who inaugurates the final renovation. Secular modernity, as we know, obviously offers its own messianic archetypes. There's technological singularity, political revolution, collective awakening, different vocabularies, different ways of the way humanity has come to see the way things, see how the chips will fall. But the point is we are revolving around the same structural tension. Interruption from without or transformation from within. As I described, different traditions may lean more aggressively or less so towards divine incursion. Others envision gradual enlightenment, humanity raising its consciousness, dismantling oppression through collective awareness, reordering social and spiritual life through interior ascent. So it is up to you to go on that healing journey, on that enlightenment journey, whatever it happens to be. Point is, it's up to you, and the less people do it, the worse the world is, in theory, going to become. Millenarianism, broadly speaking, encodes hope for a decisive age shift that is dependent on messianic agency. So it's not up to you, it's up to whoever sits upstairs to come down and save us. But obviously, as I said, by contrast, Enlightenment traditions encode hope through human participation. The question beneath all of these, though, is the same. Is salvation external recalibration, or is salvation, is true salvation? And I define salvation, I'm going to define salvation broadly, even though, yes, I'm a Christian, and so I have my own, paradigm for that. I'm going to define it broadly. Salvation being relief, things just getting better, things becoming less of a headache, quite frankly. But yes, is true salvation, external interruption, or is it interior recalibration? Is it internal reordering? The doctrine of Tselem Elohim, this is the image of God. It insists that your divine image, that the image of God, the way you were made in the image of God, the ultimate divine, yes, the ultimate divine entity that persists even in a state of imperfection, of fallenness. All humans have the structure. All human beings are made in the image of God, and yet they still retain capacity to change. Even you can make decisions. You have agency. Scripture, I don't think, I mean, there are Christians who disagree with me, so take it with a grain of salt. I don't think that scripture guarantees exemption from tribulation or suffering. I think it promises fidelity through it. A very personal, very intimate, very aggressive actually form of fidelity and care for not just the collective, not just the church, but the individual. The saints are not promised insulation from collapse. Rather, they are promised transformation through collapse. That collapse is inevitable, and that distinction matters. What appeared to be rescue into a higher plane was simply and very, very, very disappointingly just exposure to a wider frame of the same reality. The boys were not transported into peace, they were reabsorbed into war. Their quote-unquote deliverance was just displacement into into a dimension that essentially was into a dimension defined by identical logic. So were they saved truly, or just just reconstituted within the hierarchy that already preceded them? If interruption merely scales the evil, the chaos of the island, then the issue is not spatial, it's actually anthropological. Golding's ending is unsettling to some precisely because it appears to grant salvation through interruption rather than interior transformation. Of course, after the end of a story, after something so chaotic and so destabilizing, it's not nice to think that, okay, we gotta do some interior work now in order to save the world. Like, no, we want salvation. We want it now. Why do we need to go on healing journeys to save the world? Like, no, absolutely not. Point is, the naval officer arrives. The boys weep, and in theory, the authority of the adults finally resolve order. Yet offshore awaits a warship, an emblem of adult civilization's organized violence. The island was not an anomaly. As communicated, it was a microcosm. The boys' descent replicated the macro logic of the adult world that they believed themselves to be separated from. The interruption in this sense does not reveal innocence, it reveals scale. You guys, the way we narrate survival defines how we will endure, how we will deal with destabilization. Consider contemporary anxieties, AI, restructuring label, the loss of anchoring figures. I'm talking leaders, I'm talking family, I'm talking parents, institutions. Think economic precarity, geopolitical volatility. What I'm saying to you is the interpretive frame that we choose, evacuation, endurance, or participatory transformation, will shape our psychological posture, not just as a generation, not just as a collective, not just as a community, but as a human being capable of making choices, of being resilient or not, or otherwise. If we expect only interruption, only this divine incarnation from above to fix the mess of things, then we will perpetually expect an officer, a messiah, a singularity, a revolution, and unfortunately, we will remain perpetually incompetent until the next cycle. If we believe transformation is possible, agency does return, not absolute control, not absolute, not definitive influence over the way things will end up panning out, but at the very least, recalibration. And that brings us again to what William Golding's Lord of the Flies, what the ending actually implies. If interruption is absolutely required, does that imply that humanity cannot self-correct? Golding appears pessimistic. Remember, as I said, to me, his philosophy seems to lean a little bit more Augustinian. Remove constraint, reveal the disordered appetite. Christian theology is a lot more ambivalent. It affirms fallenness, it affirms your capacity to make mistakes, but it does insist on your retained image. What I believe, though, personally, okay, is that you do not outrun Beelzebub by optimizing faster. I don't think it's possible, and I think that's the trap. You do not silence the flies by becoming more efficient carry-on. If humanity defines itself solely by optimization, by strategic survival, by competition, then yes, we recreate the island at scale. I'm not saying that we dispense with these, with these qualities, but when they start to define us, I think it becomes dangerous. If humanity defines itself through something prior to survival, rivalry loses its ultimacy. To reiterate what I said earlier, every generation believes that it stands on the very brink of disposability. Every empire predicts its impermanence. Every panic cycle feels terminal. And yet, the true definition of humanity has not fundamentally shifted for over a millennia. You are not required to outwit, outlast, or out-optimize to justify your existence. Am I saying be lazy? No, absolutely not. Please do not absorb that from what I'm saying. But that whisper that you must justify yourself, justify your value, that rather you must work like a slave in order to justify your right to remain, that is a parasitic dominion through fear of irrelevance. The image of God, you guys, is not a competitive credential. It is a bestowed identity, and flies cannot devour what they did not create. Thank you very much for joining me today. I hope to see you hopefully very soon. If not, again, who knows, it might be a minute. Anyways, thank you for lending me your ear. If you stayed for this long, you take care and goodbye.